Back yourself through the race with vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Today, tomorrow, together.
The saying goes, where the rubber hits the road. None more so is that important than in off-road racing. Hello everyone, I'm Arnold Getz, and in this preview we look ahead at the Nissan Sugarbelt 400, and we also indeed take a look at where the rubber hits the road in off-road racing. Research shows that only 4 rubber patches as big as the average hand is on the road at any given time when one uses a vehicle. Now that may not be strictly true for off-road racing. There may only be 2 sometimes, but be that as it may, tyre choice, tread and pressure is all important. In preparation for the 3rd race in the ABSA Off-Road Championship, we found out the inside and outside story. Robin, you have a whole collection of tyres here. Take us through what you've got on the rack for us.
Well, anyway, basically we're going to look at is the different choices in the Mickey Thompson range, Matador, and also we've got Cooper through Dunlop. Just to give an example, we want to start off is look at something like the Mickey Thompson range, just to give us an idea of the choices available to the competitor. Obviously, one of the key things to look at is tread patterns and even sizing of tyres. So yeah, just a very broad cross-section, ranging from something which you have on your typical pickup or 4x4 you use on the road every day, right down to something that's really, really aggressive for extreme mud, even rock crawling type applications. So that's one of the main considerations the guys look at, is what am I trying to achieve with the tyre? What's the nature of the race? Hard pack? Is it going to be a muddy race? Maybe even a sand race like the desert race? And based on that, the guy would then make the selection as to which tyre is going to be best suited for the application.
And then, of course, there's the Matador.
This is the Matador over here. It's basically what we're aiming to do is have a control tyre. In other words, take the tyres out of the equation in the production class, particularly in the top SP class. Have everyone on the same type of tyre. They've then got the same wear, the same performance, and then rather try and put the performance in the driver's hands rather than in the tyre's hands. So what we've done is we looked around the world to find a tyre that we believe would offer good compromise, price, durability, and obviously performance, and especially in the production vehicles, punch resistance. So we've gone for a tyre, comes from Eastern Europe, already used successfully in the Dakar events. It was very, very successful in the Spanish Off-Road Baja Championship last year, and is a very much purpose-built tyre for off-road racing, and particularly for our what we call production vehicles in our country.
What are the differences intrinsically between the cars, the production tyres that they use, and then the specials?
Well, if you look at something like in a production vehicle, such as the Matador, you see it's a relatively narrow tyre, quite a high profile in comparison to what you would use on a special, but mostly in terms of the width. We're looking there at a tyre that's typically in a 235 type of width, where if you look at something on a typical off-road special vehicle, you look at something probably in the range of about 250 to 300, so much, much wider. The special vehicles, bear in mind, they're driven through 2 wheels in most instances versus this being on a 4-wheel drive. You always got to have a look. The most important consideration is unspun mass. On a big special vehicle, 2-wheel drive, you can have a really monstrous tyre, typical 12.5-inch type tyre. But if you have 4 of those on a production vehicle, a typical bucky, it's going to go nowhere in a rush. So you're looking for something that's going to give you grip, but bear in mind you're gripping through all 4 tyres versus something where you're gripping through only 2 tyres.
How personal is the tyre pressure and the choice thereof?
It really differs from competitor to competitor. Everyone's got their own little secret that they've sort of developed through the years. Some of the guys like to run them really hard. With the new technology tyres like the Matador, we can run much softer. The idea has been to run, the softer you run, the more grip you're going to get, but a little bit more susceptible to punctures in the sidewall. The idea with something like a Matador is that it's got a Kevlar construction, in other words, very strong. So something like this we can run as low as 1.8, 2 bar, where if a guy's using a standard production type tyre, it maybe run as high as 3 bar, even if a guy's talking 3.5 bar. So because it's a little bit softer, bear in mind, the tyre's quite a high profile, so this is a very important part of your suspension actually. If you've got a solid tyre, your suspension's got to take all the loads itself. With something like this, your tyre can absorb most of the load, and then your suspension can work more effectively and more efficiently. So you don't want to run something that's a rock solid. Same goes for the construction. Some of the guys through the years have tried things as much as 16 plies. where it's literally like having a brick as a tire. It's got no give in the sidewall. And the problem there is literally a solid thing, so all the little shakes and rattles and rolls get taken up by your suspension, which works suspension very, very hard. Something like this, all those little bumps and ditches taken up by the tire, and your suspension only comes into play on the bigger stuff.
How important is the tire in the car's performance?
As a tire supplier, we'd like to say about 80%. Obviously, this is the contact patch onto the ground. So you can have all the performance in the world, you can have all the reliability, engine performance, everything there, but this is the one contact patch. And literally, you can see from this, the contact patch is as big as my hand. So you've got 4 hands holding this car that's with 200, 300 horsepower onto the ground. So I believe very, very important. Also, the way the guy drives the tire, the way he looks after his tires. Some guys tend to go out and really spin up the tires very early in the race. Some guys might look after the tires and then have better tires towards the end of the race. So tires is a very, very important consideration, and particularly how you look after them, and some of the guys even the way they use them themselves, the way they set them up on the vehicle, the pressures, etc., even down to the choice of tire tread pattern.
And rims?
Rims obviously very important. Tire's only as good as its rim. It's no good having a very strong tire and the rim breaks all the time or the rim bends. In most cases, particularly in SP and in the special vehicles, the guys use a purpose-built competition rim, which is designed to be not only lightweight but very strong as well. And in most cases, this allows us to run tubeless, which many people are a little bit surprised about. They think, oh, with thorns and things, we're going to all try and run tubes. We actually run tubeless because running tubeless is actually better for thorns. It allows the tire itself to actually seal the hole to protect the tire. With a tube, if you cut the tube will typically slice. And you can't actually repair that or anything. So we try and run tubeless, but to do that you need a very strong rim, and obviously something that's not going to dent or break or anything like that.
You've had your own experience. It's not the easiest thing to change a tire when it's gone flat, when you're in the middle of nowhere.
Well, the racing nowadays is so competitive, one just can't afford any flats. We always talk about if you put your foot outside the car during a race, you've lost the race. As simple as that. In order to be competitive, to be running the top 3 or 4, one needs to run clean, no punctures, anything, and hence why I think in recent times tires have become even more important. And I think particularly in the production vehicles, with going to a one brand tire where everyone's using the same tire, it's going to be even more important than ever before, because if I can get through without a puncture, you're on exactly the same tire, I'm going to have an advantage. And bear in mind, a tire change takes about at least 3 minutes, 2-3 minutes. Plus it messes up your whole rhythm and everything. It takes a lot of time to get back into rhythm. So it's going to be very important with this, and we've seen already in rallying and many of the other sports as well, where looking after your tires, not puncturing, maybe driving a little bit slower, is actually going to make you faster in the end of the day.
That was the next question. How do you look after a tire in off-road racing?
Well, to pace yourself. Obviously, tires, as they get hotter, the tire pressures go up, and as the pressure goes up, the tire becomes a little bit stronger, can handle more in terms of bumps and rocks and things like that. So one of the keys is to look after your tires early, allowing you to start on a lower pressure, but not go out and smack every rock known to man. But also what's changed in the last few years since we've gone to proper competition type tires is in many cases, especially the top teams, we actually attack the rocks. The old days when you saw a rocky patch or a little rocky outcrop, you went right down to first gear and toodled across it. Now we often use that as an overtaking opportunity and really bash through the rocks. So it's very important we have a good tire. But one's just got to be a little bit careful. A lot of the drivers through experience have learned which plants will cause punctures rather than others. Things like the desert race where you've got berms with sticks and roots sticking out of it. You know that certain times you don't slide into the berm, other times you can. So
read the terrain.
Yeah, so the experience comes into it, and you often find it's the older, sort of wiser types that have less punctures, and the young hotshots tend to go flat out and pray it doesn't puncture.
Let's talk about the Nissan Sugarbelt 400 up ahead. Lovely show from Mark Grenier in Port Elizabeth, but now he has to follow up, and Nissan have the guns cocked at him as well, don't they?
It's going to be a difficult race. It's a different condition. The Toyota was particularly strong in the Eastern Cape. It's well suited to that type of terrain. Sugarbelt's a different story, and Nissan's obviously strong. Ford with Neil Woolridge, always strong at his home event. It's something to look at there. There is talk about rain, so already now the guys have probably had 20 calls this week about what tyre selection for the event, because it's a lot of turf, very, very slippery. So do you go to a mud tyre, do you stay on something that's maybe a little bit stronger? So those are already some of the decisions. From a Toyota perspective, the team's done a little bit more homework, and hopefully the cars get a little bit better all the time. So I think it's going to be one of the better races around, quite frankly. We haven't been to that area for a couple of years, so it's, once again, it's new, it's fresh again. But if it rains, I think it's a little bit of a lottery.
The standard of competition has really closed up, whereas in the past you go to a race and find maybe 3 or 4, 5 contenders. Now there may be a dozen.
Very much so. I think with the SP class growing as it has, and particularly the vehicles from the manufacturer being handed down through the field, we now find ourselves in a situation where there's probably 12 guys in top cars, all capable of winning. Some of the guys just need a little bit more luck than others maybe, but it's very, very competitive. We ourselves have had a few events where you have a little problem in the prologue. The old days you'd be 4th or 5th, now you're 20th if you're lucky. So it's really, really good competition, and I think as it develops through the years, the sport's going to get better all the time because more cars are going to go down the field, and eventually you're probably going to have 20 SPs. And even if you look at Class A, the same kind of numbers. So I think that's really going to make it, once again, the whole objective of SP is have it equal for everyone. The privateer can compete against the factory teams, same equipment, same technology in his vehicle, and it's up to him how he prepares his vehicle and how he drives his vehicle.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you off the beaten track to find solutions.
The Nissan Sugarbelt 400 preview continues, and in fact, Nissan have been flying the flag in off-road racing for the past 7 years. They certainly have all the expertise when it comes to tyre choice. Glenn, firstly, the regulations for the production car class and their tyres.
Well, we've got very almost free tyre regulations, apart from the fact that we can have to use 4 tyres for the whole event, 4 new tyres, and of course the spare tyres that are carried on the car. And this was brought in midway through last year to basically curb some of the costs, which are always, you know, our biggest enemy in motorsport or all types of sport. So you can have total freedom in terms of your brand. You can have a maximum of 4 new and used spares on your vehicle. And for the production cars, you've got a maximum height regulation of 805 millimeters.
So how do you go about marrying the tyre use with the prologue and then the race proper?
Well, we always use the 4 new tyres. The prologue is so important. So we use the 4 new tyres for the prologue and then use them again for the race. As far as choosing the tyres are concerned, well, there's 2 very distinct sort of areas in terms of tyre performance. The one is the speed that we get, and the second is the puncture proof, as we call it, because off-road is really what it says, and there's rocks and all sorts of hidden landmines everywhere, and you're going to find them, and the drivers do. So the puncture proof of the tyre is really important, and that almost takes precedence over the tyre performance, as it were.
I know that you guys try to keep it under a certain time for tyre change if you do flat. What are you trying to do that in?
Well, that's sort of company secrets, as you say, but yeah, the crews practice a lot at this, and to have a puncture, it is so competitive these days that a puncture can drop you sort of 2 or 3 places if you're not careful. So, and for that case, one of our off-road tyres, wheels and rims together, weighs 32 kilograms. So it's you don't really want to get a puncture if you can help it.
Do drivers have specific tyre brands that they like using, or is that something that is dictated from office?
It's really dictated from office, actually, in as much as what's available to us, what we know in terms of performance. But as manufacturers, what we've done is we generally tend to try and run the same tyre as each other. We buy these in bulk, and this enables us to be more competitive price-wise. And we've chosen last year, we chose a BF Goodrich tyre, which was excellent in terms of puncture proof, because the sidewalls are very thick, and it's not so easy to make a tyre that doesn't puncture and has got reasonable performance. This year we're going to have a tyre change for the next race, in fact, over to a Czechoslovakian tyre called Matador, which looks from the outside almost exactly the same as the BF Goodrich, but inside it's not quite the same. So we'll see as the season progresses, and I think there's a fair degree of tension, because I suspect they're going to be more vulnerable to punctures, so the drivers are going to have to be more careful and choose exactly the route that they're going to go on.
Silly question, but how important are the tyres in the complete setup of the car?
Oh, a huge portion of the total performance. If we say that when we started off-road racing and we didn't have, should we say, a specialized tire, we would often have 4 or 5 punctures during a race. I mean, these cars are really quite heavy. The tire is small. The suspension travel is limited on the production vehicles, so punctures are, as one could say, an occupational hazard. But these days we often go through a race with having no punctures, and on average during a year we'll probably have 4 or 5. And sometimes we get what's known as a double puncture, which is a real nightmare, where there's an obstacle in the road, maybe a steel fence pole. The driver hits it with the front tyre, goes over it with the rear tyre, and the next thing you've got 2 punctures on one side. The trick is, of course, is if you spot them at the same time, which often doesn't happen.
Let's talk about the upcoming race. The pressure's on for Nissan after Toyota's last win. I know that there are some other areas that people are also looking at, but obviously you want to get back to your winning ways in the next one.
Oh yeah, the Sugarbelt is a tricky race. It's tight in area, extremely rough in others, and it's a real driver's race. Normally 7 hours in the seat. Also vulnerable to punctures. I think we'll all be on the new tyres for this race, so the pressure's on. But yeah, we've got quite a big test session planned before the race, so we've got some new items that we're going to be introducing into the car, and hope that this gives us a bit more performance.
And over the last season or so, Ivar Tollefsen and Quinn Evans have obviously also come to the fore. They really are now contenders.
Yeah, I mean, Ivar and Quinn have really outshone themselves almost. They came in last year and took it relatively easy in the beginning and have just built up more and more speed, and now he's a force to be reckoned with. And Ivar's a very successful businessman, but a very determined sportsman. So he's not taking this lightly. He takes it very seriously, and we're extremely happy with his consistent performance.
And then having Duncan Voss and Hannes Grobler in the same team must be a dream in one way and very tough in another.
Well, they have given me a few grey hairs from time to time, that's for sure. They look, we need each other, teammates, to push each other further forward. So we're extremely happy to have 2 of the best drivers available, huge experience, and they very often, the cars come back with almost not a scratch on it, and that's great for the team. And the speed is there, so we'll see.
And how's Jean Moore coming along in the co-driver's seat with Hannes?
Yeah, Jean's progressing nicely. In the first race, in the Nissan the Nissan 400 in Darling, they were first on the road, and the navigation's very tricky when you're under real pressure, and he performed brilliantly for a long way. And I remember Duncan and Ralph saying, well, let's see how long it is before he makes a mistake under pressure, and he really didn't make one, so he did nicely there.
Back to where the rubber hits the road, though, to show you the wear and tear of this type of racing.
We're going to be looking at 2 tyres, one brand new, one used in last time's racing at the Longmore Forests. Glenn, talk us through it.
Well, we've got 2 tyres here. This is the new Matador tyre from the Czech Republic that we're going to be using. I don't have a new BF Goodrich anymore to show you, but they're both exactly the same tread decks when they're new, around about 10.5 millimetres. And here we see this is the BF Goodrich that came off the car from Hannes in the last race, and it's literally nearly worn out. There's probably 3 millimetres of tread. So here we have another angle on the performance of the driver and the car and the tyre connected. If he wants to push flat out in the beginning, at the end of the race, I mean, this is 400 kilometres non-stop, the driver has to remember that he might not have any tread left at the end. So, in Longmore Forest, it started raining at the end, and it might have been really critical had the event finished another hour later. But we can see how tough it is on the tyres. This is the new Matador tyre. The sidewall is quite broad and deep, and we need this in order to cope with all the rocks and the ditches and all the things that these cars come across during the races.
As far as dry and wet conditions are concerned, there's obviously then a major difference in the performance of the tyre.
There is a huge difference, and of course these tyres are designed really for rocky, hard conditions. 400 kilometres of really tough, unseen terrain. So if it was raining from the start, one would have a big decision to make. Poor wet performance, which they are because the tyres have got stiff sidewalls, versus having the possibility of punctures. Generally, we only use one tyre, and that's this tyre, whether it's dry or wet. And in the beginning, the drivers have to watch out and be really cautious, not sliding off and hitting things. But later on, the events tend to dry out as the day goes on, and then the tyre comes into its own.
That gives you great insight into the production car class tyres, but the specials or space frame vehicles do employ an entirely, if you'll excuse the pun, different type. Goodyear South Africa's JC Erasmus explains.
Well, what we have here is our Wrangler MTR tyre. It's a purposely built off-road tyre, not only for racing, but for all the normal off-road enthusiasts, especially the guys who want to travel through Africa. It's a very aggressive tyre, very aggressive tread blocks, and shoulder design to provide maximum traction in all directions. People sometimes think the traction is only when you put the power down, but these vehicles don't need to slide or slip off a face. And then what happens with the shoulder blocks is also extended into the sidewall for additional traction in soft soil or muddy conditions, and even in sand, when, provided you let the pressure down. Now, if you look at this whole design, then because it's extended into the sidewall, it's quite a wide footprint, which also assists with additional flotation, and that's why the tyre's got magnificent traction.
Most of the A-class competitors use Goodyear. Why?
Well, you know, I think the important thing about this tyre is, of course, the traction, because the A-class, well, the special vehicles is two-wheel drive, so you need all the assistance you can get from the back tyres. This tyre's also got a durable puncture resistant in the sidewall, and it's designed such that it doesn't affect the handling of the car, because you can overdo it. So once the sidewalls can get so stiff and it's so thick that it affects the handling of the cars. And this tyre hasn't got that. It's got technology in it to resist punctures, but at the same time the handling is still there, and it assists the suspension when the sidewalls take the bumps and absorb most of the energy that will go through the tyres via the suspension to the dampers or shock absorbers.
Goodyear has been involved in motorsport for a very long time. How does that translate, in particularly this category, to market share?
Well, you know, there's no doubt about it. You know, I think the guys who are serious about off-road racing have a very good look at the tyres, and especially if you run a tyre that's available on the shelf. This is not a purposely built racing tyre. This is a tyre that's available on the shelves. Then the guys, everybody wants it. You know, the guys who are serious about off-road racing say they don't want anything else on the car.
And then with the amount of rapport that you have with the off-road racers, there's obviously a lot of feedback as far as this tyre is concerned. What have you learnt out of it, and what has it meant for the progression of the tyre?
Well, the amazing thing is, you know, quite often we sit down in discussions that the development of the successor of this tyre is already underway. And one of the things that they will look at is to increase the speed limits, because even in off-road racing, we've seen the speeds just going up and up all the time. And all these aggressive tyres are not really designed to do those high speeds. This one, for example, can do 160 km an hour at maximum loads, no problem. And occasionally, we know that off-road racing guys in South Africa exceed most probably 180 km an hour, but the tyre can handle it. Short bursts like that is not a problem. But future development, I think, will have a serious look at it. And of course, the new SUV coming on the market got these 18, 19, and 20-inch wheels with low profiles. And Goodyear has already developed a 55 profile for these tyres for some of these top guns in the SUV market, with unbelievable speed ratings of 200 km/h plus. And the tyre is just as aggressive and can do the same job as it's doing here.
Tell us about, firstly, the inflation that most of the specials use this at, and then secondly, what sort of temperature does the tyre get to at the end of a race?
First of all, the inflation is a personal thing, you know. We can always recommend the base inflation. We say never go below a minimum or don't exceed a maximum, but you've got to play in between, because suspension play a part because of the inflation. Depends on the damping, how hot the springs on the vehicle. It depends on driving style also. Some guys would like to run it a bit higher because they like to slide the car at the back. Other guys don't want that because they say then they're not in control. They like the front to be in control. But the pressures that we normally recommend is about 2 bar, you know, and we say the big thing, I think, in off-road racing, and if you want to protect the sidewall also in a way, is not to run too low, but also not too high. If you run it too low, then obviously the sidewall becomes vulnerable. But at the same time, the tyre needs to flex. If there's something in the way, it needs to push the tyre out of the way. And if the pressure is too hard and they can't push the tyre out of the way, the sidewall or the crown with a big jump or whatever, it's going to break the tyre. There's no doubt about it. And sometimes that break doesn't occur immediately, but it sits there, it's inside the tire, and maybe 100 kilometers later the tire will fail. So yes, tire pressures, but I think the guys by now have worked out what works, you know. Obviously, when it gets to temperature, these tires don't get very hot, in spite of what people think. They get quite hot. It's not like a racing tire. They run quite cool, and especially in wet conditions in some of the races, then we would actually recommend that the guys go a little bit up with the pressure, because normally they will build up on itself, but when they continue to run in water and mud, they're not going to do that, and then you're actually running them a bit too low. So that's what we do.
And the early weather predictions for the 2008 Nissan Sugarbelt 400 is exactly the opposite to that. Sunny with a high of 28 degrees and 91% humidity. In the production cars, it's Cronje and Birken who lead by 2 very small points over Voss and Pitchford, and Woolridge and Scholthammer. And in the specials, Marsh and Groenewald are being chased by the Solvalds, ×2. The racing headquarters will be the Beaumont Eston Farmers Club outside Pietermaritzburg, and the prologue over 65 kilometers starts on Friday the 16th at 12:30. Until next time, when we'll show you the fine racing from KZN, you keep it on the road, we'll keep it off-road.
That was the ultimate test, the ABSA Off-Road Championship.